You're listening to The Extraction, conversations on the systems and strategies behind dental practice growth with Colin Ambler and Kyle Bergman. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Extraction podcast. Your co-host, Kyle Bergman, along with my co-host and the CEO and co-founder of TeamCare, Colin Ambler. And today we have a very, very special friend of the pod and TeamCare. He's been here since day one. So there's like BC and AD, and we're talking to someone who is BC. And his name is Matt Pryor, Senior Practice Growth Analyst at Chrisad, which has spent decades helping dental practices grow through a combination of research-based marketing, analytics, and hands-on growth management. Matt really epitomizes what it means to be a Jedi-level operator within the dental industry. And a lot of what TeamCare is built on and the intelligence and the winnings and the learnings was heavily influenced by this guy specifically. And so it's a real honor to have you on, Matt, and we can't wait to chat more about dental stuff with you. So welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. Yeah. BT, before TeamCare. That's for sure.
BT.
But,
And we recently had someone on the podcast and it was their first podcast ever. And we didn't mention that on, and Colin and I were kicking ourselves after, but I'm not going to make that mistake this time. This is Matt's first ever podcast.
I'm sure the offers are going to start pouring in after this one, though.
So Matt, how did a guy like you end up in a crazy industry like this? What brought you to the world of dentistry?
So actually, I have a degree in marketing and advertising, and essentially they taught me everything about how to develop and create a marketing campaign. It's a very scientific approach to this. And as I was looking around for companies to work for, in a variety of different businesses, Chrisad was the only one out of probably 30 different companies that I looked into that actually followed the formula of doing the research, doing the focus groups, doing the testing, the color testing, font testing, everything you can imagine before developing a marketing campaign, and also understood what IMC is, which is integrated marketing communications, which a lot of people confuse marketing and advertising as though they're two separate entities. But in today's world, it all works together. Advertising is one component of the marketing. But one of the things Chrisad does is it looks at all the different variables, like how they're handling the phones, what the wait times are like when you get into the office, how the bathrooms look. All of these are actually marketing components in and of itself. And so Chrisad was one of the few companies that understood advertising isn't a solution to anything. All it does is drive interest into your business. And based on all those different variety of variables in the marketing world, if they're not all kind of working together, one of those elements can actually cause the entire experience for the patient to change. And I always like to use a restaurant analogy to where you go into a restaurant, they sit you at the best table, the waiter's great, your water's never empty, the wine is delicious, the food fantastic, but at the end of the visit, a rat runs across the floor. Really doesn't matter how well everything else went. The one thing you're going to remember is that variable of the rat coming around, and that's what you're going to talk about. And so for advertising to work, all those other marketing components have to be set up correctly in order for that advertising to pay out. And Chrisad is one of the only companies that probably is around that actually understands this. And it's why our clients do well. We break down all those variables before we ever start the marketing campaign so that the advertising can work well. But yeah, I just stumbled into them over a Craigslist ad. And after I talked with them, back then, Craigslist. But then, after I talked to them, I was like, these guys really have their act together and they understand how to make a business successful. And it just happened to be dentistry.
Wow.
Yeah. I have such a good history with Matt. So Matt was the single reason that we became successful as practice owners. And what Matt's talking about gave me such a foundation. And even just the way you explain things, Matt, like I have so many Matt Priorisms, whether you know it or not. And the restaurant analogy, it has more depth to it. And I think the reason it sticks around is because it works. I think you have such a good way of communicating with people and making analogies that make them understand, because Chrisad's also taken this philosophy that sometimes people that have been in the dental industry for 30 years are your worst enemy. And you can do a lot better with people that have worked in other industries like the restaurant industry, hospitality industries that have worked hours. Like, Chrisad, I mean, one of the things, I'll go back and then I'll go forward, is we were dead broke, Sharon and I, and we got referred to Chrisad. We had the scratch practice, as it's called, and we got referred to Chrisad, and like literally someone dropped 2 books on my table. One of them was The Guide to Scratch Practice Growth. I was like, "Oh, great. That sounds like a perfect fit for me." And the other one was the Bahamas Principle. It was like, if you follow this recipe, you will leave your practice because you have so many high productive associates. And the only thing you'll need is a beach chair to sit on the Bahamas with. And I was like, wow, like I'm a entrepreneur. This is go big or go home situation for us. And so we did all the things with Chris had, and Matt was our coach. Matt was our growth rep at our office. And Matt was part of hammering out the fundamentals at us. So I actually have some stories, but I'd like to maybe take this opportunity. I've told my story so many times. Matt, while you're on the pod, do you have any remembrances from back in the day, Sharon Blyler, Colin Ambler, Noble Dentistry, early beginnings of what you were trying to do with us and get the practice off the ground?
Absolutely. I think, one of the biggest strengths that you guys had going for you and why you turned things around so quickly was because you weren't from the dental industry, Colin, and you were running the show. And really what we find is a lot of what's happened over the past 30 years, 25 years ago can't be applied in today's world. You're dead in the water if you do what they did 25 years ago. But Colin, you came in with an open mind and you just said, I just want to follow the recipe for success. And when we have somebody like that, that says, all right, I'll just follow it. I'm not going to fight against it. You guys have the research. You have enough clients that have followed this and got it done that I'm just going to follow your lead. I don't know better, I think was the best starting point you could ever have with a client. And so I remember the early days, Colin was answering the phones, getting all A's on the secret shopper calls. You kind of were able to be in the gutter, like actually doing the front desk work, the filing of insurance. You learned all that. And so it gave you, again, another advantage in that you didn't have any preconceived notions. You didn't have any idea of like, well, this is the way it's supposed to be in the dental world. So I do remember you were one of the easiest clients to work with along the way because you were simply like, what do we do next? And then you implemented it. And really, like you referred to it as like the recipe for success. I hate to use the word franchise because I feel like it's got a negative connotation, but a lot of what Chrisad's doing is basically kind of creating systems that are franchise style. Meaning that if I apply these principles at every single practice and I follow it this way, I'm going to end up with a successful and growing practice. And most of it revolves around the hygiene department. If you focus on growing the hygiene department, which is just exams, if you focus on that element of the dental practice and growing the number of exams, the practice always universally grows. Because more exams means more restorative means more collections. And so along the way, a lot of the stuff that we look at as consultants for dental practices, these other companies, Dental Intel to whatever, Dentrix to all these different things, they did not understand the importance of some elements, nor did they allow you to track them. And so I would always go to these meetings with Colin and I'd say, well, how many patients were pre-appointed into primetime appointments? What's your capacity fill rates? And he would have to pour through and try and dig out this information, which is why I believe TeamCare was created.
Yeah.
Because he could set up the algorithms that would shoot out the answers to him.
I was lazy.
So
I'm not doing all that work.
Yeah. And that's the other mother of invention right there, laziness, the father, so to speak. But that really changed the game, not only for you guys, but for me, because I didn't have to rely on anybody else to get the data. You were pulling the data just as we needed it so that we could assess if they're doing things correctly in that franchise manner. So that's where I say, like, if you follow the system, it doesn't matter if you're in Philadelphia, if you're where I live in Charleston, South Carolina, where Kyle's at in Baltimore, California, the same thing works in every marketplace. The same way that Subway has a certain way that they make the bread and the way that they set up the meats and cheeses. And if you're opening a Subway franchise, you don't say, well, I'm going to do the bread differently over here. That one variable change can ruin the rest of the experience, the rest of the sandwich there. But they know if I do this the exact same way, no matter where I put a Subway, it's going to be successful. Don't tinker with the bread.
Yeah.
I love that.
I want to say you think I was like this great student. I remember the situation much differently. Matt was a hard ass coach. Are you kidding me? You think this was just a good student? I felt like I was working my ass off, and then Matt would come in for my meeting. I'm like, can't wait for Matt to come in and give me my good numbers and give me a pat on the back. He's like, what are you doing? There's soap on the sink in the bathroom. I'm like, what do you mean? There's supposed to be soap on the sink in the bathroom. And he's like, no, it's leaking out. It's sloppy. It's like the equivalent of the rat running across the
Uh,
floor.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think it's one of the best things, Chris. Like you go into an office, you pick up so much context about what's going on and the subtleties of that patient journey. I think Matt's really awesome with that. And the other point I want to make about Chrisad that I think is really unique, if you just take mental note, this is like the franchise model of things. It was one of the things I remember early in the day. He just like everyone else in that you could run up and down, the highway, the major street near us had like a logo of a tooth. Like everyone's got the tooth logo. That's a dentist. It's like marks the sign. It's like the barber pole. But Chris had really forced you to break that paradigm and change the way you think about that. And right now we have a tree, and it's amazing. Like it was the first brand change that we did, and they're like, no, 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 you're not going with the tooth. We got to pick things that are trusting, long term, safe. Nobody wants to see this tooth. Like when they think of the dentist, it's like this
Extracted tooth.
symbolic.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm always like, yeah, why don't you just put blood at the bottom where the roots are for your logo? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, nobody
So
wants
those
to know
early
any of
days,
that.
those early days are awesome. And I think some of those concepts still hold true. And we observe hundreds and hundreds of practices outside of Chrisad now with TeamCare. And by far, the biggest and fastest growing practices are Chrisad practices. And that franchise model, that recipe, I've seen it in all sorts of ways from the data, and it is the fastest growing practices, bar none.
One question I have for you, Matt. You answered one that I wanted to ask you, or you partially answered it around like the most common mistakes that you see practices make when they're trying to grow. And I think part of that mistake is having a fixed mindset with beliefs that don't necessarily work. And so when you have someone who was a baby when it comes to the business of dentistry, like Colin, and is able to experience like quantum learning the way a young infant is taking in language, you had that with Colin. And Colin's also very coachable. And so I could see how that would have been a pleasure. But here's a thought experiment for you, and it's inspired off of what I know the founder of Chrisad, John Christensen, is doing out in California right now, which I love, building his own practice, really walking the walk. If someone were to give you $500 to $1 million tomorrow to build your own practice, what are like the top three things that you would do to set it up for success, kind of using this proven playbook that you guys have?
I can even start with where I would put it. I would put it somewhere where it's not in a major city or anything like that, but more or less where the wave is going, where the houses are being built. I want to be there before the houses get built in a year, because I do find the more rural you are, the less competition that you end up having. Big cities and things like that are a big draw. Everybody wants to have a practice there, but it's like sharks to blood. Like people think the other dentists are thinking the same thing, so they all pile on there. The other thing that I would do to spend the money on is, while marble, floors and amazing chandeliers and stuff like that look great, I've been with many scratch practices that were on the cusp of going bankrupt, even though they invested in all this amazing interior, because they didn't invest in the staff, which is the thing that actually produces the money. So if I'm on a limited budget like that, I'm not really going to be focused on the coffee machines and, having maybe right out of the gate the latest x-ray machine and all that stuff that really impresses dentists. The marketplace is impressed by you having availability during the times when they want you to be available. They want immediacy. They want to get right in. They want pleasant staff members. It's really about that patient experience and not about all those tangible things like, again, marble floors and whatnot. So I'd say that's a big mistake that I often see, is they spend a lot of money on the decorum, and then they're like, but I'm going to open the doors I'm going to do my own hygiene, and I'll have an assistant that also answers the phone. They like cheap out on the staff members, the thing that actually is going to be producing revenue. And then a lot of times by the time they come to me, they're 4 months in, and they're like, there's no patience here because they didn't save money for marketing. They didn't have it properly staffed. And John Christensen, for an example, when he's opening his scratch practice, he's opening with 5 doctors. He's opening with 10 hygienists, 5 front desk. He's prepared to see 1,500 new patients in a month. He's prepared to do $1 million in his first month, so he staffs up in that manner. And if you think about other industries like Walmart or a grocery store that's opening up, they don't open up and say, all right, well, let's put like 1 box of Cheerios on there and we'll see if it sells. And if it sells, then we'll buy more. Because the fact of the matter is that early adapter that comes in there and sees 1 Cheerio box or, 1 thing of milk on the shelf, that experience is going to be permeated to others. They may not come back because they're like, they don't ever have this shelf stocked. They may tell other people, don't go there, stay away. Their shelves aren't stocked. So you'll produce as much as you want if you staff it accordingly. And this is interesting. Like Target went out of business up in Canada. And you're like, how? Target is so successful down here in America. The reason why is they had problems with supply chains. So when we go to Target and we see there's 20 extra large shirts, 20 large shirts, when you went to the Targets up there, there was 1 shirt or you couldn't find that size because they couldn't get the inventory up there. Well, it was really quick. That word spread around. I don't know what the Americans are talking about. Target's trash. And Target had to move out of the Canada marketplace. Very interesting story. That everything else was great. Everything else was there. But if the inventory is not there, the rest of that stuff is really meaningless.
Wow. That's great. I didn't know that. Interesting about Target. So, man, there was some gold there. And a quick kind of commercial TV timeout in the middle of this episode for people that live in the Mid-Atlantic and you really love Matt. And look, if you love TeamCare and you listen to this episode or to our podcast, first off, thank you for doing that. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Just kidding. I don't even know if we have a subscribe. Actually, there definitely is a subscribe. But Matt covers the territory that is basically the Mid-Atlantic. And if you're picking up what he's putting down and you want to work with Matt, please check out chrisad.com, CHRISAD.com to work with Matt and his incredible team. Really part of the brains behind what powers TeamCare. So I want to make sure that we get that out.
And I do want to say, it doesn't matter what region you are in. The reps that we have right now are the best. And I've been working for Chrisad for 18 years that they've ever been. And we all play from the same playbook, which is written by John Christensen. He spent almost 50 years developing, refining this playbook. So I'd love to take credit for these ideas, but absolutely none of them are mine. And so Chrisad as a whole, every single rep that's out there, every single team is playing from this exact same playbook. So you're guaranteed to have the same message that's being conveyed today, being conveyed by your rep as well.
Yeah. And I want to jump in and kind of just maybe toot the horn one more time. I think some of the stuff that you talk about has such like practical undeniability. And it's like Chrisad taught me as much about general business as it did about dentistry. And I think like the restaurant analogy always kind of rings true. I think there's this big misnomer in the industry that scarcity means quality or prestige or something like that. And and so many dentists think that if I'm booked out 4 or 5 weeks, that it makes me the better dentist. I'm like more notable in my community. And it's just the opposite. And the restaurant analogy is like the best kind of way to think. It's like if you go to a host and she says, no, we don't have a next available for 4 weeks, you don't think that restaurant is a better restaurant. Like you're just kind of pissed off that you couldn't get in.
Next restaurant.
Yeah. Next.
Even if they say it's a 45-minute wait, I'm not like, oh man, this place must be really good. I'm like, I'm hungry. I'm going somewhere else. There's food elsewhere.
100% right. And like the capacity to do it. It's like, you're the most thrilled when the person's like, yeah, I'll get you seated right now. Here's a table.
And I'll tell you right now that in today's world, like it's never been easier to get new patients because of when COVID hit and there was a hygienist shortage, right? Everybody started to get booked out 3-4 weeks, things like that. And a lot of the dentists out there really don't understand the true value of the hygiene appointment, which leads to the exam, which leads to the restorative. And they just look at, well, a hygienist costs $75 an hour and I only get $75 for the pro fee. So what's the point of having a hygienist here? And so these practices are still booked out. 3, 4 weeks, some of them 6 months. And if you get a hygienist in there and you're talking on the phone, like you said, Colin, and you're like, yeah, we have availability tonight. We got a 5, a 5:30, a 6. Even though this is a new patient, we've identified that these patients are referring other people to your practice
100%.
before they've even walked in the door, because that's a story. My
It's
dentist was booked out 3 months. I called up to Noble and they got me right in. They haven't even been there and they're referring people to you.
yeah.
So that's an interesting thing that wasn't like that 6 years ago, 10 years ago, but it's
But
like
the
that right now.
concept, the teaching also that you guys brought in of pre-selling the office, the restaurant analogy, it's like, you've told it to me a million times. This is a Matt Pryorism. It's like when the waiter comes tableside and they're like, we have the best steak in town. It is unbelievable. The chef is known for this, the chicken parm. It's like, as a consumer, you're like, how can I say no to the chicken parm like steak, like with that introduction?
Absolutely.
You guys brought that into the dental office and it's taught in the phone scripts. You're going to love it here. The staff is amazing. The doctor's great. We have availability evenings, Saturdays. You can come on in. You can bring your friends. You can bring your family, your coworkers. Like that, it's like people like mistake that mailers and that marketing and the advertising is new patients. It's like you said, it's like this is all driven by internal like staff behavior, and I've seen it work so well. It's like everyone thinks that marketing is like this magic bullet, but like you said it earlier, it's just this stimulus that kind of makes that phone ring. But getting the flywheel to turn is your staff. 100%. That's why TeamCare, that's why we built TeamCare. And that's why, I mean, I don't know if we have time or not, but like I'd be remiss if I wouldn't let Matt give one of his most famous Matt Pryorisms, which is you pay maybe I'm going to butcher it. You pay
Yes.
someone hourly to show up and you pay them incentives to perform. So
Mhm.
just rap with us about what you like. And even, Chrisad's got a long history of paying people for secret shopper calls, for paying people hygienists per patient, paying doctors on production, like everything. And even TeamCare's roots has been about how to execute on incentive models. But it was born in the playbooks of Chrisad. And I think, you see in and out, 50 offices a week, a month. I mean, just talk to us about your take on incentives and what you see in the world today.
Incentives drive the behavior. At the end of the day, a lot of what we convey to even the dentists that we're trying to get them to change their hours and things like that, work evenings and weekends. Nobody wants to do that. The only reason the owner operator wants to do it is because there's an incentive for them to make more money. From a staff's perspective, if they're making the same amount, whether you see 1 patient a day or 10 patients a day, they think a great day is when you see 1 patient. So again, to get them to work against their own self-interest, that's where the incentive comes into play. That's why we incentivize or encourage you to incentivize them to fill the evening schedule, to fill the weekend schedule. Because in many practices, and I was talking to one earlier today, they're like, well, if we don't have any 6 p.m. patients, well, then we go home early. Well, now the incentive for the staff is to not have any 6 p.m. patients because I get to go home early. But if I tell the staff, guess what? Any day that we have 6 columns of hygiene across after 6 o'clock and at 7 o'clock, I'm going to give you $100. Every single time those appointments all fill up. Same thing with Saturdays. We're like, we'll pay you $500 for a filled schedule on a Saturday. And I've seen it, and we've seen it hundreds of times now, to where these dentists are struggling to fill up their Saturdays, and their staff's trying to convince them, everybody's on vacation. Everybody goes to the beach on Saturdays. Nobody wants to go to the dentist on Saturdays. We change one thing. We say, we're going to give you $500 for a filled Saturday schedule. And immediately it fills up. I recall this one time I was at a practice in DC. He was struggling to fill 4 columns of hygiene on a Saturday. I said, let's bring in your front desk. Let's give her $300 to fill up this Saturday's schedule. I was there for an hour-long meeting, and before I left for the meeting, the Saturday schedule was filled and she wanted her $300. Now, the payout doesn't happen till after that Saturday occurs so that they're not stuffing it with fake patients and things like that. But it just showed she immediately knew how to fill it. She just wasn't filling it because she was really trying to prove that Saturdays don't work and that they shouldn't be there. So the doctors are incentivized to produce more, but they think that the staff should be working as hard as they are just because they're happy to have a job. And unfortunately, that's not America. This is a place where people want instant gratification, and you better give me a good reason for why you want me to book patients in the evenings and on Saturdays. And I can always tell which practices have incentivized staff members because they're excited to see me, because they know the ideas I'm going to generate for them and what I want them to do means higher
Yeah.
bonuses for them. If
Love
they're
it.
not bonused, man, they grimace when I walk in.
Yeah.
They
More work.
despise it.
Yeah.
Because they're like, this guy's going to make us busier. He's going to make it. And it's just, there's nothing in it for me. So yeah, that's why
And
one of my first duties is to incentivize right out of the gate. You'll be amazed at some of the areas you've been hitting friction with that change overnight. Again, hygienists being assisted. People are like, yeah, I want to get my hygienist. She's adamantly opposed to it. She says she's going to get carpal tunnel. The patients want to be with her for an hour. It's sacrificing quality of care. But then when we suggest, well, why don't you pay her hourly or pay her that same hourly rate per patient that they see, suddenly they're healed of carpal tunnel and they're excited to have hygiene patients double booked. And all of a sudden, they don't need an hour for recalls. They really only need 40 minutes. The only thing that changed was now they make more money when they see more patients.
And the team starts to go, right? It's like the doctor has to worry less about whipping the horse and all that stuff. It's like people start to work in the same direction. I think that's the big outcome.
and so there's two important layers here. There's the psychology of incentives, which Matt just did a beautiful job of illustrating. But then there is when the rubber meets the road, a lot of practices can get stuck in actually executing this because it gets really painful to manage incentives, communicate them effectively. And what if there was just a way where you could automatically track incentives and also automate incentive payouts? Like, can't someone make that? I wish there was really, oh wait, TeamCare does that. And I think in more recent podcasts, we've gotten so excited about the analytics and the hygiene reactivation and the treatment planning and the scheduler, which Matt talked about indirectly. Hygiene controls everything. Having availability and incentives. Incentive automation is something that TeamCare does and that Matt was influential in helping us build. Because you have practices that are like, yeah, no shit. Like incentives are great, but I got spreadsheets. We got so many people in the spreadsheet. We don't know who's doing what. And so, now you just connect our bank account to Stripe and it handles all of that. Amazing. So friendly reminder that incentive automation through TeamCare works as well for those listening.
Kyle.
Yeah. And it's key because I always like the overall arching goal, I believe, of TeamCare. Colin had said at one point is the gamification of a dental practice, which it makes all those menial tasks like reactivation, like filling up the hygiene schedule. It changes it from being just a task to now being a game. When I do this, I get a little star badge and it says I earned $10. When you turn it into a game, people look forward to that. I mean, my son loves video games, and the actual feeling he gets when he beats a level is what keeps him going and wanting to go back. And I think that there's a level of complacency that happens at dental practices with dental employees of doing the same thing over and over again without getting that feeling. So I really like the TeamCare incentive thing because it's like that little, biscuit that they get. It's basically Pavlov's dog. Where it's like you ring the bell and then the dog salivates. The same thing's going on here.
We almost named TeamCare Pavlov, but we thought it was demeaning.
Trademark. Yeah.
I got so excited when Matt mentioned his son. I thought you were going to say, my son loves making reactivation calls.
Making biscuits.
Would. He loves money. So if it was incentivized, he absolutely would.
Dude, it works so good. I mean, everyone's in it for the moon. So
quick questions, like 1 sentence or less for Matt as we wrap up here. Some fast close questions. So what's one thing every owner should focus on this quarter if they want more predictable growth? One thing, Matt.
I would say, really it boils down to adding hygiene. It's just like hygiene drives the exams in there. So I would look at it and I'd say, if you don't have availability today, you're leaving money on the table.
Okay.
If you're booking out a week, you're leaving a ton of money on the table. So it really does revolve around get the patient in immediately. And everybody loves new patients. And when I look at the charts on TeamCare, The guys that get 150, 200 new patients a month, when you look at the time that it takes a patient to get in, they have that great graph that shows you here's how long the new patient waited to get in. The ones that see 150, 200 new patients a month, the bar at the top, the 24-hour bar is always the longest. When somebody's complaining about new patients and I look into their numbers, notoriously that first bar 24 hours or even the 1 week wait time are like the shorter bars, and the ones that are the longer, the 2 week wait, the 3 week wait longer. I mean, all you're doing is kicking that new patient into the following month. I mean, we're here in June. If you're putting a patient out into July right now, you're pushing all the production, you're pushing all the referrals, you're pushing all that money into the next month, and basically you're setting your own glass ceiling. So it's the only competition you have is in your own practice and in your own schedule.
Makes a lot of sense. What is the one thing practice owners should stop tolerating inside their practice today?
Stop revolving the practice around your employees' schedules, which I often find is, well, Mary Lou can only work till 3 o'clock. And so they allow that type of thing. You will never get a job in another business where Walmart's like, well, they can't work evenings and weekends, and so let's close down Walmart at 5 today instead. You know, there's more than enough jobs out there, and if your practice wants to grow, you have to revolve the practice around the patient's needs and what the patient wants hour-wise, and find employees that are wanting to work those hours. Oftentimes it requires an incentive to get them to do it. You have to pay them slightly more. But I'd say that's a huge roadblock for many practices, is that they allow that employee, yes, they've been there 10 years and they're like family, but at the same token, the owner operator is the one that's paying the price by having the practice kind of revolve around them. So I'd say that that's a big thing that often is the roadblock to growth, is they're trying to work around employees' schedules versus saying, we're creating the schedule, now we'll find the employees that will work these shifts. I'm not cold-hearted. Mary Lou will find another job where she can get off at 3. There's practices that are like that, but don't let it be at the sacrifice of your own prosperity.
Amen. Amen. Well, Matt, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your first ever podcast, and thanks for all that you do for TeamCare.
Forgot we were even on a podcast. We'd be doing this anyway.
Thank you for listening to The Extraction with Colin Ambler and Kyle Bergman. Read episode notes and transcripts at teamcaredental.com.